when I saw some people cringe when they got their vocabulary word, and then some people went, oh, thank God I got communications. But it's really important to be comfortable with any words that we need to talk to our kids about or that our kids ask us about, and not go, please don't ask me that. That, you know, being comfortable is really one of the most important things that we can do when we're starting to have conversations with our kids. And that's if your children are 4 years old, if they're 14, if they're 18, it doesn't matter. We need to be comfortable in our conversations that we're having so that our kids can be comfortable coming to us, asking for information. So, let's talk about what we're here to talk about. What is sexuality? And it's a really broad definition. I pulled this from the Sexuality Resource Center for Parents. A definition of sexuality. We all know about what sex is, but sex is only a small part of who we are as sexual beings. Even people who are not having sex are sexual beings. We are sexual from the day that we're born. And so there's another word that you should know about and use too, and the word is sexuality. And here are some of the things that are included when we talk about sexuality. Sexuality is much more than body parts and sex, although that is part of who we are. Sexuality includes our gender identity, the core sense that we are male, female, both, neither, or somewhere in between. Sexuality includes gender roles. It's the idea of how we should be behaved because of our gender identity. Sexuality includes our sexual orientation, whether we're heterosexual, homosexual, bisexual, asexual, or other identities. Sexuality includes how we feel about our bodies, and that's our body image, and that's such an important part of who we are, and that starts when we're incredibly young, how we perceive our bodies.
And it's our middle school and high schoolers. They're always thinking about their bodies, aren't they? Do I look right? Do I feel right? And am I normal?
Am I normal?
Yeah.
Am I normal? Sexuality includes our sexual experiences, thoughts, ideas, and fantasies. Sexuality includes the way in which media, family, friends, religion, age, life goals, and our self-esteem shape our sexual selves. Sexuality includes how we experience intimacy, touch, love, compassion, joy, and sorrow. So in short, sexuality is an integral part of who we are. It is our whole body. It starts from the day we're born. It starts with how we connect with our parents, from our first touch, how we connect with our friends, and how those friendships change, how we perceive ourselves as we're getting older, and then how we continue into having intimate relationships as we become teenagers and adults. So when we're talking about sex, we are not just talking about the meat of the situation that we're all scared to talk about, but we're really talking about our whole selves and helping children understand that it is our whole being that we're talking about. So, about 10 years ago, I took two of my children to a Harlem Globetrotters game, and at some point during the game, I got called down onto the court to throw a free throw basketball. I'm like, oh my God, everybody's watching me, the whole world can see me, they're my kids. I'm like, you know, can I do this? But when you talk about sex with your kids, it's not that one shot. It is not like, I've only got this chance, I'm either going to make it and it's going to be great, or, oh my God, I just blew it, and it's ruined forever. We have multiple opportunities to talk about sex and to talk about sexuality and to talk about body image with our kids. There is never one chance, and if you think that you blow it one time, there's going to be another chance, there's going to be another conversation, there's going to be another teachable moment with your kids. So I think that we often get stuck with is it the talk? You know, is it time to have the talk? Are we going to have the talk? What's going to happen? Am I going to blow it? Is this going to work? And that's never the case. There's always time to have conversations, but it's not always about just having sex. That is such a small piece of having conversations with your kids about sexuality.
Jump in with that? So I found that with my own life, I told too much and too soon. I always, you ask one question and 3 days later we're talking about, transgender to a 4-year-old. And they're, and now I had boys, so they don't really want to talk ever. I have a son who will not talk to me about dinner, about homework, about anything. So I do feel like I hope I got some early learning in. I hope I preloaded some information because he's not receptive to it now. And so I felt like I was here as someone who was a failed parent as a sex educator. But I do remember all the touch points as my children were having romantic relationships late in high school and college, and that preloaded information comes up again and again and again about safety, about respect, about what a healthy relationship looks like. So the schools do a marvelous job of saying this is what the biology looks like, or at least they try to. I've never actually been in a health class. But that's the goal of the health class, isn't it? It's just, this is the biology, right? So we are modeling the healthy, loving, respectful relationships all the time. You can talk to your kids anytime about, especially with all the Me Too stuff that's out there, about what's uncomfortable. If you've had an uncomfortable situation or you've seen that an uncomfortable situation, you don't have to kiss Aunt Gladys if you don't want to. When she comes in for the hug, you can, what is it you told me?
Fist bump. We teach our kids that even in preschool to put your hand down and fist bump, to mark your personal space.
So a lot of these conversations are around sensuality and sexuality. We just don't put that name on them, but we're having them all the time, right?
Personal space, how you feel about yourself, again, body image. And these are conversations that you have with your children from birth. The way that you touch your children and hold your children is starting to establish those ideas of what healthy relationships are, what positive relationships are.
And the school will never give you that. What is a respectful relationship?
So when Marion and I were talking about talking to people, and when we've talked to parents in the classes that we've taught, one of the things that comes up a lot with parents is the fear of not repeating the experiences that we had with our kids. So I want you to think about the sexual education that you had growing up. You may not have had any. You may have had some with religious overtones that as an adult you don't agree with. You may have had the health teacher, the PE coach, at school. So I'm going to ask you some questions to think about the sexual education that you had when you were growing up. Don't answer anything out loud, but start thinking about these. So when were you taught about sexuality? Was it an ongoing lesson? Did you have it at school? Did you have it at home? Was it faith-based? Was it secular? Who taught you? Who taught your sex education? Was it a coach? Was it a teacher? Was it someone in your religious organization? Was it your parents? Did you receive positive or negative images around sexuality? And that's a really important one. Around positive or negative images around your own body, including your sexual parts? Did you receive positive or negative images around touch and the need for human affection? When you were talking about puberty and gender roles, did you receive positive or negative messages about how boys should behave and how girls should behave? Did you receive positive or negative messages about loving and intimate relationships? And what were the messages that you received around dating and sexual attraction? When were you told it was okay to engage in sexual behavior? And the last one, what where you taught about sexual responsibility, about preventing unplanned pregnancies and avoiding sexually transmitted diseases. A lot of information brings up for parents, for me, brings up there's a lot of fear about talking to our kids because of all the experiences that we had, and how to not share those experiences if you didn't have a positive experience, if you didn't have positive messages about your own body, about sharing intimate actions with other people. We want to make sure that we don't share those negative images and those negative connotations with our children. So if you can summarize the messages that you received about sexuality in a sentence or a phrase or word, what would it be?
If you're comfortable
If
sharing.
everybody's brave enough.
Yeah. I may not.
Don't. That's the word.
Good girls don't.
I'll just say, I felt like maybe I didn't hear it, one that might have been left out was media. Growing up, even television and movies had a big impact, I think, on most people on how they view things.
Absolutely.
As you were speaking, my first was from my peers. That's where I got like the goods.
Yeah, absolutely.
Judy Blume.
Mine was wait until you get married.
Right, absolutely.
So simple. You had your hand up?
Well, Judy Blume was going to.
Yeah.
Yes.
My mom got me a pamphlet from the doctor, and she said, here. It was better than nothing, you know.
My mom told me, you know, it's gonna feel good, it's supposed to feel good, that doesn't mean you have to do it.
She said that.
Absolutely. A lot of words that as we talk to parents that we hear are shame. There's a lot of shame associated with sexual feelings and sexual identity, fear. There's confusion, and that is definitely not what we want to pass on when we have conversations with our children. Continually remembering that our whole being is sexual, and these are positive attributes about us, and we want to share with our children that these are positive and good things.
It's hard for me to figure out how to balance not communicating fear, but caution. You know,
Absolutely.
that violence is an issue, that STDs are an issue, that, you know, that there are things to be cautious about, and how to balance that with, there's a lot of positive, but there are negative things.
Life-altering things.
Yeah.
Information is always the best way. The more information that children have, the better they are able to make better decisions, more informed decisions about situations that could be violent, that could result in disease. So always information is an important.
Give them an example.
Yeah.
Give them the
And Aaron, yes. And so in response to what Aaron said, I agree with that completely, because I think we are sexual beings, and we are born for sex. We are made for sex, for pleasure, and for procreation, but we are made that way. And that it's certainly appropriate to say to your child, this is normal, this is natural, it should feel good, all of that. But I think the issue I struggle with as a parent is how to balance that with what is the appropriate time in your life
Right.
for this to happen. And I think that's the struggle. There are all of those issues about sexually transmitted diseases and violence and what have you, and consensual sexual relationships, but I think a big issue for me is emotional readiness. And are you emotionally prepared for this?
So I actually had a handout tonight on that, but we couldn't find a copier. So we will get that to you. We actually have an emotional readiness, and it's a checklist for teenagers. And if you can't answer it, you're not ready. And some of them are, again, like our definitions. Some of them are a little embarrassing, some of them are very light. But it's for teenagers to look at. And if you can answer yes, then you're ready. If you can't, you're not. But we'll talk about a little bit about that. So setting up ground rules for talking to your kids. There are 3 R's when you have a conversation about sexuality. There's respect, that each and every person is entitled to dignity, self-worth, and respect for their attitudes and beliefs about sexuality. That's for both of us. You know, we need to be respectful of our kids and their beliefs and their feelings as we're talking about sexuality. Relationships. People of all ages, genders, races, backgrounds, income levels, mental, physical abilities, sexual orientations have equal values and rights, and that sexual relationships should never be coercive or exploitative. And responsibility. Every person has the right to accurate information about sexuality and to have their questions answered. Knowledge about sexuality is helpful, it is not harmful. All persons have the right and obligations to make responsible sexual choices, and we need to express our sexualities in ways that enhance human wholeness and fulfillment, that express love, commitment, and joy. So when we have the conversations, these are just things to keep in mind. And then we have 2 things that are really important that we use in OWL. We have a Parents' Bill of Rights and we have a Kids' Bill of Rights around talking about sexuality. Our Parents' Bill of Rights. We can choose how we teach our children about sexuality. We can give our children open and positive messages so that they will feel good about their bodies. Our family values around sexuality are very important. We do not need to share our experiences with our children. Our sexual experiences are ours. That's not a conversation that we need to have. And we will answer any question as it is asked and only as it is asked.
What does that mean?
Well, we have a fabulous story. So the training for the Our Whole Lives program, first it did a great job of stopping any of us if we started to overshare. And if you need to overshare, get it out here. But it really doesn't even belong here, because we just need to be talking about facts and getting that out of our system, that really our personal experiences are not the education we want to give our children or each other, was really, really important. So we just want to say that again. When we talked about this talk, that was the first thing Emily said. We need to make sure that everybody is comfortable that you don't have to bring any of your own sexual life into the conversation. You really are there as a resource, just like you would about reading or any other thing that you're teaching your children. But what we like is the question you just asked. You only answer the questions that are asked. And it can be hard to discern or pull out that question. So the funny story is that one of our parents in our training said, yes, my daughter asked me about annual sex. And everybody just went, oh, what did you tell her? I told her annual, it means once a year. Annual sex is once a year. And that actually did answer the daughter's question, because I forget, 3rd grade, 4th grade, she'd heard a term she didn't understand. She put into a word that she did understand. And really at that point in time, all she needed to do was have that put to rest. She didn't need to go into a subject matter that might have been a little bit early for her. Listen to their questions. And I don't know if you've had this happen about, oh, what's for dinner tonight? You need to sometimes ask 2 or 3 times to dig down to what the actual question is that you're hearing. But the question you're hearing will be appropriate. They are ready for that answer because they're asking. And I know that because my son asked me at 10 or 11 about Santa Claus. And I said, if you really want to know the truth. He said, well, I can't figure out how it works. I said, if you really want to know the truth, we can have that conversation. Well, it's because it's all one night. Like, he doesn't want to know the answer, does he? Give him one more chance. Yeah, he shut it down. It's like, no, I'm working on this, and he kind of walked away. Wait to find out what the real question is, and then you can answer it. And probably that'll also give you time to sort of corral what you know, what you're willing to share, what feels appropriate to share at that time. And you can always come back. Since the conversation's not a one-time conversation, remember what we said yesterday? And I feel like maybe I didn't answer everything there. Come back and give them some more information. Annually, if nothing else.
So I guess my question was like, so what if it's a 10-year-old or an 11-year-old and they are really asking, like, what is anal sex? I mean, or like, is that appropriate at that age to, if they're asking a question, you're saying, you just tell them the answer to that?
So I'm thinking at 10,
Yeah.
let's just make a supposition.
Can I add to it?
Hmm?
Can I add to it? Because it's
Okay.
10 and 11 years old, not asking, but looking it up in internet.
Sure. So they've heard the term,
Yeah, they're hearing terms.
and they know what it means. They know what the term means. Anal has come up in some other
Or other questions, maybe not that
Yeah.
particular, but other sexual.
So I think you give the simplest answer to begin with. And then sit with that for a moment. Did you have questions about that? No! I'm good. And they're out of there. You've already taken care of the situation. If they want more,
They'll ask.
they'll ask. And it's certainly with the internet now, you're going to give them better information. So don't shut down the conversation. I'm not ready to talk about that. Or that makes me uncomfortable. Although you can be honest, I'm a little uncomfortable talking about that, but this is what I can tell you.
So, jumping on to what she was asking though, chances are they might go to the internet before they come to me. So, I mean, I'm not scared to talk about it,
Yeah.
but, like, so that,
Exactly.
just don't worry about oversharing, because, I mean,
Right.
I'm tempted to try to head this off. The
Right.
first information they're getting isn't from the internet, it's from me, and that they are comfortable coming to me to talk about it. So, how do I balance that? Like, I don't want to, push a conversation that they're not ready for, but I also don't want them to circumvent and start getting information from their peers or from the internet that may not be accurate, that may not be helpful, that may be...
Can I just,
Yeah.
the next thing I would add is, what do you know?
I think I
So
know
you've
some
got,
stuff.
no, not you. I mean, I'm sorry, that's for the child. I'm sorry. You're good. You're very good. But if you're worried, I think that's the next question. I'm glad to talk to you about it, but tell me what you know. Tell me what has you feeling this way. What you've seen, heard, yeah.
And, okay, so just to circle back though, to say to your kid, I'm not really comfortable talking about that, then you've just done what we just talked about, which is acting uncomfortable talking about it.
Right,
And
so, but are they going to pick it up anyway?
well,
If you're uncomfortable?
but isn't there a better way to say, well, what you're describing is a sexual act between adults, and isn't there a way to just be really straightforward and put it very matter-of-factly?
Oh, there is, absolutely.
And without putting any like, well, I don't really talk about that right now, because then they see all that like weirdness.
Oh, I'm with you.
But how about I'm uncomfortable, but I'm going to do my best?
Right, right, because that's what I'm saying, if they've caught you off guard, if you're not, and I recommend going into a closed room and start reading off the terms. We're in the middle of teaching at our church right now, and when I see the other teachers just, vas deferens and testes and urethra, and I'm just going, I am so impressed with you right now. Because I'll still stumble, I'm not completely comfortable with it. I don't mind being honest about that, but if that's not the last sentence, I'm not completely comfortable, but let me tell you what I can. Because they're going to know already that the moment gets heightened. You know that moment that gets charged all of a sudden. Okay, here it is. But take a deep breath together and write. This is what I want to tell you. I think it's okay, but anything you can do to make yourself more comfortable. Yeah.
May I ask a question, because you said something that I thought was really important about the fact that your child does not
Kids' Bill of
So
Rights.
there's the
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Can we get a copy of these?
We can share any information with you, absolutely, yeah, we absolutely can. So the Kids' Bill of Rights is, your kids have the right to ask any question about sexuality without fear of shame or embarrassment. They have the right to receive full and accurate information. They have the right to be supported in sexual expression that is healthy and life-affirming. And they have the right to gain knowledge and values that we need to make positive and appropriate decisions about sexual matters. I can tell you the answer that I have. My oldest is a senior, and we have had conversations as he's had more serious relationships to say, hey, you know, as this is getting more serious, let's make sure that we're talking. Let's make sure that if you are heading in a direction that's going to be intimate, let's talk about whether you have protection. I don't think, and I don't think anybody here thinks that children or teenagers should be having sex, but I still want to have that conversation about if you're heading in that direction, let's make sure that you have all your information. And he knows I'm having this conversation tonight, and I'm like, so what do you think, you know? And it's something that we can talk about in our house. And we talk about it a lot in a more of a light way, so that if there's a serious issue, we can have that conversation. One of the things that Barrett did tell me I could share tonight is that, so my older children have gone through the OWL program. Both of them have gone through twice. And my youngest will be going through her first one in the fall. And I used to tease them that if they wouldn't get out of bed in the morning, I'd go, oh, I think I have an OWL question. You know, they go flying out of bed. But if they didn't, I'm like, so, what's the definition of vagina? And how fast they're up now. So we can joke about things like this at home in kind of a light way, so that opens that experience for having conversations about sexual activity, because it's really important that if they're moving in the direction of having more intimate sexual activity, that they are armed with information, that they are emotionally ready. And so am I going to walk up to him and say, hey, are you having sex today? No, certainly not. But I am going to talk to him as he's in a relationship with somebody about where they're at and emotionally if he's ready for things. Absolutely.
And can I add, I don't think we have a right to any of the details of our child's sex life that they don't want to share with us. And I had an experience with my child bringing home his first girlfriend and thinking that because he was 18 and in college that he was able to share with us his full sexual being. And we kept saying, no, 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 no. We're good. We're good. But yeah, but it doesn't mean, so even a charge question, Mom, what would I do if I wanted to get contraception? Would have to be a discussion about contraception and about readiness and all the other faith values, whether they're faith-based or not. Without a, why do you ask? Right? Unless you'd like to share. Is there anything you want to share with me? Would be a great question. But if they go, no, I'm good. I think we have to respect that.
Can I break it here a minute? I'm just wondering how many people here have already had experiences with their children regarding sex, and maybe even in middle school, because that's what happened to me with my older son. And it wasn't a serious relationship, you know, and it wasn't even, it was before internet, so, you know, and I think that the idea of bringing up a topic like sexuality with your children is a good idea, you know, it really is. But I'm not sure how realistic it is for everybody. I think the subject and the topic are, in many cases, there already. We just don't know it, you know? And I discovered by a class note that I found in my older son's trousers when I washed them from his girlfriend, who was telling him how much she enjoyed sex. I mean, she was very explicit, so I knew it wasn't a confusion of terms, you know. And I went to him and I asked him about it because he's in 8th grade. And he got really angry at me. My sex life is my business, you know. I'm thinking, yes and no. No, because who's going to pay the bills if, you know, all of a sudden things, you know, go in a different direction. So I'm just thinking it's really, I mean, I think it's almost like ideal for you guys to be talking about this kind of conversation with 9th grade on up. But I'm just wondering how many people here are in a situation that's already way beyond what they think it is with their kids. You know, just throwing that out.
Well, I think, I'm sorry, because I think just what you were saying about your son being in a relationship, but I don't think waiting until they're in a serious relationship, I don't think that's appropriate for everybody. I mean, that doesn't, that's not the only circumstances that kids are going to be having sex of varying kinds. So waiting for that as an indicator, I think, would be a mistaken thing to do.
So
For my family anyway, I would not wait, is what I'm saying.
Right, so our children started in 2nd and 3rd grade with this topic. And always in the context of relationship and love and respect, which doesn't mean that there won't be experimentation outside of that. So when it happens outside of that, what do? You bring them back into the conversation, right? You can't stop them by saying, you will not ever do this again, right?
No, you can't put the...
So the conversation, so the conversation has to be now that we know what's going on, and this is how this affects our family. This is how this might affect our finances, quite honestly. And I have no intention of, see, once you start saying I have no intention, you start to shut down the conversation, don't you? So you've got to find ways to bring them back into what your values are. And I won't assume that your values are my values on when and how and why. But you're the best to be the person that sets that down, right? And keep talking, and keep talking. I don't know what else to do. And information. When my son, and this was in college, but I ended up saying, I'm sorry, you've got to go to the doctor, and the thing is tomorrow. You don't realize that every child, every person your partner has slept with, you have now slept with. He's like, she only had one boyfriend, right? And so you're responsible for what her boyfriend might have been in contact with, and it's not your job to figure out whether he's somebody who is responsible in his sex life or not. We need to take care of your sexual health now. And that's loving yourself and taking care of your needs. It was a hard conversation. But yeah, I'm really glad that I did that. I think he's glad that I did that. Do you feel like you walked through this situation well? I mean, it was a hard time.
I sort of tramped through the situation. I mean, I took him out to a park where we could be really isolated, you know, and sat down, and I think it's helpful to not have walls around us, because he was pretty angry, and I was a little upset. And incidentally, I was a single parent at that time, so I don't know how many people share that with me here, but that makes it harder. Okay, let's just get to that right away. And so there wasn't actually, for quite a while, there wasn't a man-woman relationship in front of this guy. Yeah. So it may have been different had that been the case, but I don't know. You know, more and more people have a situation like mine where they're, at least for a while, you know, perhaps single parent.
Yeah. You said something I thought was so important about being out in the world. Have you noticed that boys have talks better when they're not face-to-face? I think that's beautiful, to be somewhere where you can both be looking at something else. Cars are also excellent. And things can be offhand if it needs to be, yeah. Since I don't have girls, do girls want face-to-face more?
No.
No.
Yeah, it depends on your kids. I don't know that that's male, female. I just think it's-
That's your child, yeah. That's great, that's wonderful.
So, in our,
The other thing, I will say this, it is good to get them out of the house, because if they're in the house, they will escape to another part of the house. I once had a conversation in a cafe, so that they were trapped. They couldn't leave the situation, and because they were, this was not gonna be a conversation, like, yeah, we're having this conversation, and he couldn't escape from the house, so it was, that's.
the kids in our class wear hoodies.
The class we're teaching right
Right
now,
now,
we're
yeah,
teaching
and
out
so
for
when
sixth grade class.
When we have conversations that are difficult, the hoodies come on, they get really tight like this, you don't see anything, but they don't,
You don't have to look.
yeah,
listen.
exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
taking a
So,
walk is a good idea.
I've heard a lot of things about the internet, information from friends, how to start these conversations, and teachable moments are really important as far as when you hear something or when your children say something, that's a chance to get a little bit deeper. When something comes up on the news or the radio, to say, hey, how do you feel about that? Or let's talk about that a little bit more. And that opens up some of those icebreakers when I don't know how to talk about this, I don't know where to start. The Me Too movement, is in the news. Different things open up that space, and that's where we just have to take a breath and dive in and have that conversation. But it's not like you walk in, hey, so let's talk about sex right now. And everybody goes, ugh! But finding those moments when you see pictures on the internet or something, that's the opportunity to start a conversation anytime.
But also, one of the things that I know I was always worried with having a son was, particularly for him, was just making sure he understood some of the legal issues around this too. And I know the dad with the middle schooler, I had a friend whose son got charged with some things, just because there were some odd age, there were just some really weird age differences. And so to make sure that we give that information to our kids too, so that they understand. If you're under this age or they're under this age, whatever that might be, you can get yourself in some lifelong trouble.
Yeah, these things are peculiar from state to state.
Yeah, they are.
And so I don't really know Georgia.
So let me ask to you guys, I just got my son the Tom Morgan book about what is
The 7 deadly
the laws around a teenage. So do they address these issues? Is it just more about driving and drugs and drinking and all those issues?
No,
all
I
those
think he
other.
has the 7 deadlies in there as well.
Great.
And several of the 7, the things that juvenile can be charged with as an adult, several of those, I think more than the majority of them are sexual related.
So what is the name of that book? Just to throw it out, what is it?
Child pornography too.
Yeah.
Right,
right,
In
yeah.
high school, they said that if you were under 18, don't quote me, but if she's under 18, all bets are off.
Yeah.
I'm not a lawyer, and I don't very well on TV, but I think Georgia changed their law where there's some kind of Romeo and Juliet thing, where
Yes.
there's less than 2 years of age difference, then they will not prosecute you, even though you're an adult and the woman.
Absolutely. Oh, is that the name of the book? Ignorance is no defense. I recommend. Yeah, I recommend it. It's updated every year or two for the most current law. So Ignorance is no defense by Tom Morgan will help.
We used to bring them in to the schools, and he would, and at one time, every 7th grader got a copy of the book.
Nice.
We used to do all that, but they are available, the copies are available at the Decatur Crabb Library.
Yeah.
And the one thing I think J. Tom Morgan would say over and over, especially since you said going different state by state, just think of it as Georgia always has the worst laws against children.
Yeah.
We have the worst laws and they go against children. So if you think of a 17-year-old sending the sexting thing, they will treat it like an adult. Just different things. You want to think that it's not going to go on the side of children where you would think it would naturally. And I believe J. Tom Morgan says that. So you can get a copy of that book there.
I think that the legal age of consent in Georgia is 16.
16 is the age of consent.
goes to something someone said when they were talking about what their mother said about, sex is fun and should feel good and so on. And so, aside from, the rules and the sort of establishing boundaries or whatever, how do you promote the idea that you might be a resource to say, ask questions about when there's like a term that's being bandied around by a friend or something like that, and then they're like, oh, well, what's this? And then, so you can also have the opportunity to help support that sort of learning about sexuality, and not just it be like, okay, let's set down that this is a rule here. Like that, what's BDSM or whatever, and you're like, oh, well, okay. But I would actually hope to have opportunities for, maybe not every question, but questions to come up. And are there ways that, say, the OWL program recommends that?
So children feel us out, they ask questions, and from simple things like how they look in something and things, and they do feel us out to see if we're a good resource for information, especially the pre-puberty years and starting to look at body image, and they do come to us for information about their bodies, and those are good openings. I don't know if that's answering your question the right way.
Yeah, I would hope that too. Once again, my boys never talk. So I don't have that two-way. They do as adults. They're great adults. But in teenagers, in fact, they hid. Anybody have boys that hid for middle school? They grew their hair long and hid for 3 years. So yeah, right, that's exactly what you hope for. That if they have a real question, they know they can come to you.
However, I became the sex ed mom, and at some point I finally said, is this your question or is this a question your friend has? Because they all figured out that I would talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
And at some point I was aware, I wasn't real sure I wanted to be the sex ed parent for the whole neighborhood.
I get that. One of the nice things, I think, with the OWL program is that you've got other teachers who are not your parents.
Right, exactly. So they'll have to
And they've got a place that they can ask, and an adult that they know, within reason. They won't come up to a church and ask. But they've got an adult that they know is someone that they can say, when can we talk later, or is there something that,
Question. So, as a mother of 3 boys also, so you say are you saying don't impart information if they don't ask? Because I'm pretty blunt, and I know that sometimes there's no question. I'm just putting stuff out there.
right. So you're talking teenager now, right?
Right.
Right, so I was answering questions that were asked to 5-year-olds and 8-year-olds.
Oh, yeah.
But I think a 17-year-old, if you feel like there's something you need to share, and you need to share it right now. This is the conversation I need to have with you.
And there's always just the book, there's books that have every definition, and they're targeted to teenagers. And, I'm not quite ready to give my son the book that my husband bought, but it had everything. Someday, maybe we can do this to college. But if you look at the books on the sexuality section, you can probably pick the one that has an appropriate range of definitions to talk about stuff. And I don't know if y'all have resources and everything, but there's also websites now targeted to kids. There's one called Sex Inc. Sex Etc. That's it. Sexetc.com. And it's put out by a college. But it's targeted to kids. It has everything that you put in your definition: gender. They have an Instagram feed where you can post anonymous questions and get answers on the Instagram feed and all kinds of stuff like that. So, like you said, resources are, to give them the resources.
This is a little young for teenagers. I do think, all of a sudden, I'm remembering there's an older version of this. It's perfectly normal. But this went into my kids' bottom drawers, where I would discover it every now and then. And I knew that they had a place to go to get it. Even though this is really talking about things in a very simple way, it is all spot on. I mean, it is all accurate, and it is 100%, grown-up's not the right word. If you are more mature, you will be able to understand what's being said here. It also, the gift is, I've never seen as many naked pictures in my life, and they look like real people. Oh my God, it's just as many body shapes as possible, and I thought, the first time I opened it, this is life in a world where kids can see porn in a heartbeat. And it's not like anybody you have ever seen in your world. This is real world. It felt really comfortable and comforting. So if nothing else, if you were to end up with this, I would say to a teenager, oh, I thought this would be good, and now I see it's not. I'm just going to leave it here. But this is way too young for you. You don't need to look at it. You know, at least they've got access to that. They've got the internet. They've got bookstores. Yeah.
And our family used every version of that book.
Yes.
In the series, and our only rule was, this is for our home.
Yes. Please don't take this out to share with them, to be the sex ed kid.
How can we get our kids in the OWL program? Or could we do an OWL program in Decatur?
I can't answer that one. Our programs are offered currently through the Unitarian Church and through the UCC, and there are multiple OWL programs there are enough of the churches in the Atlanta area that offer those at different ages and different times. So you can.
So you need to be a member of that church?
You do not know, and they're secular. There's the one that we teach doesn't have a religious overtone. That's a separate section. And most of the kids that we're teaching in this session are not.
But there are kids,
yeah.
You know.
Right.
So
I'd
yeah.
be worried about bringing kids into. There's already a form community, a form clique, and then they're already awkward about going to this program.
Yeah,
it's the
kids we currently got. Some know each other, some don't. They're not coming into our church isn't large enough to have a youth group that is cliquish. It's just how it is. The Unitarian Church, I think, is the same way. 400 to 600 members. It's just not a huge Southern Baptist church, huge Methodist church that has multiple programming for the kids. Yes?
Do the parents come, or is it just the kids?
It's just the kids. Parents come for one meeting, and it's just the kids.
And how many meetings is it usually? What's the curriculum like?
The kindergarten through second grade, the 4 through 6 are 12 classes. The 7th, 9th, and the 10th, 12th, I think are 15. It's a longer, it's a little bit of a longer session. So ours run, from January up until spring break.
Okay.
There are always handouts that go home. There's always encouraging conversation starters. I'm sure most parents come home and put it on the sideboard and go make dinner. But it's available to you if you want to use anything as a starting point.
Can you teach it in the community?
You can teach it in the community. Absolutely. Like I said, it's a non-religious program, so yeah, it can be taught. It can be taught anywhere. So a couple more things. Want to make sure that we know what healthy relationships are. So when we're talking to our kids about relationships, healthy, and we always want to encourage our children to not have sexual activity young. we do want to encourage our kids to wait. But sexual relationships are consensual. They are non-exploitative. Partners have equal power, no pressure, and no force. And that's a conversation to have all the time, to make sure that your children understand that anything they do is in agreement with another person. That they're not feeling pressured to do something by the person that they're engaged in, by outside groups, whether it's friends pressuring them to do something, that or that they're not putting pressure or expectations on somebody else who may not be ready. That healthy relationships are mutually pleasurable. Healthy relationships are safe. Healthy relationships are developmentally appropriate. They're based on mutual expectations and caring, and they're respectful. And always having conversations about being respectful in relationships, having conversations, making sure that you're on the same page with another person is really important. Are you thinking about, if you are, one of the things that we talk about, are you using are you talking about it with another person? Is your body language, making sure that everybody understands that we're on the same page in a relationship is really important.
And to understand that all this, some of you may have been hearing this through the lens of sexual intercourse. This was not a list of things that have to do with sexual intercourse. A sexual relationship is any intimate relationship that is starting to break into those intimate boundaries that we keep for ourselves. And I think the more we can talk to the kids about the fact that you can be sexual and sensual with someone you love, and it does not have to be either sexual intercourse or no sex. I mean, that a mutually respectful relationship has many colors, flavors, tones.
And then talking to your kids about a plan is really, really important. And that is one of the handouts that I have, so I apologize. But making sure that, especially as your kids get older, that when they go out in the world, that they have a plan in case they get in a situation that they're not prepared for or that they don't know how to get out of. As parents, we talk all the time about if you're at a party and there's drinking, call me and I'll pick you up, no questions asked. If you're in a situation where you're uncomfortable driving, anything like that, we always say, just call me and I'll be there. So the same thing is really important when your kids are going somewhere that there may be sexual activity that they're not prepared for, or they honestly don't know how to get out of. It just happened is not something that we want to hear as parents. What we want to hear is, come get me. That opening that space to say, if you're not ready, it's okay. If there's a word, if there's a phone call, if there's a text message that says, hey, I don't know how to get out of this. That the same thing applies from drinking, from parties, that does with a sexual relationship or a sexual situation that we don't know how to get out of. That we will stop everything, that we will come and get you. And have that conversation, making sure that your children are in a safe situation. Are you going with a friend? Are there people at the party? Are there adults around? Are you prepared to stop if something happens? Having those conversations about where their comfort level is with being with another person. And being really clear that we will stop everything that we're doing and come get you. That we will, it's not a no questions asked situation. We will ask if you're okay. We will ask if you're safe. We will ask if you're hurt, if you're scared. We will ask that. But we'll wait to have a deeper conversation the next day or a little bit later. But the first question is, yes, I'm going to ask you if you're okay. It's really not a no questions asked situation. And to remind them of their Bill of Rights, that they can talk to you without fear or shame or embarrassment, especially if a situation like this comes up where they're calling you or they're texting you to get some help. they don't need to be embarrassed that they got stuck in something that they weren't quite prepared for. That it's okay that as parents we are there for them no matter what. And to remind them that they have the right, that they have the values to make appropriate decisions about their bodies and their sexual health all the time. So reminding them before they go out, you know, whatever your value system is at home, whatever information that we have before we leave, so that helps in a situation when they're away from us that this can happen. So I did apologize. I did have some handouts, so it's a great checklist of like, are you ready? Are you sure you're ready? And a little plan put together.
I think one thing that's missing from the conversation is just, in this day and age, is never, ever, 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 ever share a nude picture of yourself.
Absolutely.
You know, because you're talking about going out into the world. They don't have to go out in the world to do that. They can do that in their bedroom, and you can never get it back. You can never, ever get it back.
And I think you can say that any time of the day or night. I think you can say it in jest. I think you can say it seriously. I don't think there's any problem with that. Don't do drugs. Please do not take a picture of your genitals.
Yeah.
I think that's beautiful. You think it's funny? Then don't do it, please. I'll be checking your phone. Please don't take pictures of your genitals. I don't know why this has become a thing, but it sure has. But I don't know if there's any value judgment around it. We just don't do it, right? But you have to, and my children crawl, you know, my son, because I will say that out of the blue, and you will crawl under the, just, you gotta know, you do know this, right?
And I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one thing I think also, it's not okay to ask somebody to send you a picture. And that's something that is happening in the high school.
Ask somebody, share somebody else's picture, any of that stuff, that material will get you in trouble.
And the comment my daughter made was, well, everybody does it. Because I said, a boy shouldn't be asking you that. And, well, everybody does it. So I think we need to spread that message to our daughters and our sons.
So there's a conversation around self-respect, isn't there? Because
You're an SSA child pornography. Do you know what that is? It's illegal to do it all the time. Possessing, sharing, giving.
And you don't know what happens to that. Even if it's Snapchat and it goes away, you don't know if you have ever get it back.
So what I've seen, I've got two daughters, one's in high school, and what I see, and I've seen it from even the middle school, so conversations have to start much earlier, just based on what I see come through my daughter's phone.
I have a fifth grader, and things that she's telling me about the conversations that are happening at that level.
Yeah.
So it starts way earlier than we imagine.
But here's what the boys learn very, very early, and maybe girls learn it too. I only see it coming in. It starts off very innocently, where you'll get a text that says, "I think you're pretty." And if they don't instantly see bubbles coming back, like a response, they time it perfectly, like 3.8 seconds. It'll say, the next text from the boy will say, "Oh, Billy took my phone and wrote that. I didn't write it." And it absolves them of any, I didn't say it, so I can't get my feelings hurt if you don't like me or anything. But then it goes, you know, very quickly into middle school from, "I think you're pretty," to, "Do you want to," and then much more graphic, and then much more graphic than that. And if there's no response, then they just write, "My friend Billy wrote that, it wasn't me." And so it's not just certainly the pictures as a whole thing, but I think it kind of goes back to what we were talking about earlier, just that solicitation of a 12-year-old girl of...
All I'm worried with that is, I think they also need to be careful about letting somebody else use their phone.
Wow. Yeah. Either Billy uses a lot of people's phones, or, you know, it's just something they've learned to do that gets them out of that, you know, whether I get my feelings hurt if I asked her out and she said no, or whatever the case is. But you see it a lot with questions around sex.
Which, can I add, so it also happens the other way, girls to boys too. And I think we always want to go to the boys and stereotype, but it definitely goes both ways.
Yeah.
I think there's another topic here that I know when I go on Renfro and work with the sixth graders, we talk about like digital citizenship.
And I'll say to them, like, your digital profile, like your Instagram, like I can look at that and see what you post and what you say and all of that. And then I know you here in the classroom, which one is really you? Like, do they match? And they'll say the one that you see here. And so I think there's a whole conversation that needs to be said about teaching our kids. I mean, that phone is them. That phone's an extension. It's an extension of all of us now. And like how to not hand your phone because it's really important. This is coming from you. Have your phone locked. Or, but I think that's a whole, like another conversation. But what I was going to ask is now, because the OWL program's been around for quite some time. Yeah. So have they added on the social media or digital component?
They're in the process right now, actually, the K through 2 and the 4th grade through 6th grade has been updated, and they're in the process of updating the 7, 9, and 10, 12 right now. And things that are changing are, names are not gender specific anymore. So in any of the situations that we work through with the kids that is non-gender specific, LGBTQAI is coming in. There's more conversation about gender fluidity in this one than there was in the older one. So they're in the middle of the 7, 9, 10, 12, so I haven't seen that one yet.
I just wanted to follow up on the one thing. All those situations, while they're very aggravating and frustrating, they do open up huge opportunities to talk. They also open up opportunities, at least they have for us, and I'm sure for anyone in here, to say, so it's not appropriate for them to do that, but it's not appropriate for like anyone to talk to you like that, right? That's just not someone who cares about you wouldn't say that to you, right? It's not that. And so
conversation about healthy relationships.
Absolutely, right. And so here's a response to that. Obviously no is a perfect response to it, but you can't text that to me, and if you do, then here's what's going to happen, or whatever. And
it opens up the door to talk about bullying.
Absolutely.
Relationships with your friends. Often.
Yeah. And are your friends receiving texts like this? And if they are, then talk to them. I mean, so all those things can be turned into conversations too.
And I heard, you were talking about like the mean girls conversation, whatever. We want to be careful not to pigeonhole girls as the only ones that are mean. I think like, I have 2 girls, and I want to make sure that, like you were talking about boys, it comes from both sides. The sexual talk or whatever. It's the same thing. It's not just girls that are mean in middle and high school or whatever situation. So I want to make sure that we don't pigeonhole that situation.
That's a good point. It's true, but both manifest differently in how it plays out too. So
Exactly.
But when Jen said that's why it's talking about separation, because it's kind of a different, I don't say beast. Well, it is a beast. I mean, how it plays out.
Changing topics. Do y'all talk about porn with the kids and how that should be, how it should be addressed for parent, or do you have any share with parents about porn? Because I can tell you what our narrative on that. I have 2 boys. But I want to give y'all,
Talking about it in terms of that, it's not a healthy relationship.
Yes.
It's exploitative. It can be coercive. So using it as a this is not a healthy relationship. This is not real. Or was Marion saying these are not what bodies look like in general. And having that opening for healthy relationships. So in that sense, yes.
Yeah, and the other thing, well, I'll share what we told my 12-year-old when he was 12, because he was mad because we locked down the computer. He was really mad because we locked down the computer. And he said, why don't you trust me? He said, it's not that we don't trust you, it's that the internet is a wild west and we don't want you walking into the bad neighborhood. And then my husband said, well, actually we just don't want you surfing porn. And he said, do you know about porn? He's like, yes. He said, have you ever seen porn? No. Have your friends? Yes. Which meant he'd seen it too. And so this is coffee and sit down and push papers around my desk and I drive home and I have dinner and then we stare at the TV and then we go to bed. He said, that's my day. And you know how James Bond goes to the bank and blows up a building and seduces the woman and steals the jewels and wins the poker game and parachutes from space and lands in the water? He said, that's James Bond's day. He said, the difference in what you're seeing on porn and what you're seeing in typical is like the difference in my day and James Bond's day. and so the fact that you would see that would give you an expectation about sexuality that is not exactly reality. And that's not to say that, you know, I have a lot of thoughts, but I don't want to go about that. But the point was, by exposing yourself to those images that are very graphic and very intense and way beyond your years, at 12 especially, even at 16, at 19, they are, I don't know if y'all know this, but they are rewiring their brains. And they are not going to have normal sexual responses because they have rewired their brains. And I think if you tell a kid, there are teenagers who will not get erections in front of other women because they're so wired to porn that they can't have sex. And if you tell them you're ruining your sex life by watching porn, which is what I tell them, I say you're going to ruin your sex life by watching that stuff. So do not overexpose. I said, it's like having a glass of wine or drinking the whole bottle. I said, don't rewire yourself that way. It's proven.
Yeah, I think it's an important part of the conversation because I'm sure most teenagers have looked at it.
Of course.
I mean,
I'll be honest, my son saw it in the cafeteria, Renfro, on somebody's
they're looking at it.
So, it's out there.
They're all seeing it. Maybe they're not looking for it, all of them, maybe they've all seen it.
But I mean, I don't know. And the only thing you do is like beg to
You know
don't
it's
do that to
out
yourself. Just like you wouldn't drink a bottle of vodka alone, don't consume that in the same way because it will do damage.
It's problematic because we have a sex drive that's unrelated to consumption of liquor or sweets. It's a hard thing to do. I wish I did a better job of limiting and surrounding my child's online life. I would recommend we all go home but that's not this conversation.
Yeah, right.
But I'm so with you there. But yeah.
And looking at where folks are, I think we're gonna have to wrap up.
Okay.
And maybe y'all can stay around and ask questions, answer questions.